You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we will show you how to reclaim, reconnect, and refocus your life by bringing you the top real estate professionals in the industry. We'll pull back the curtain so you can implement these tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo. All right. Well, thanks for joining us here on episode 32 of the Reinvest Podcast, where Seth and I get to show you how to maximize your life through the power of real estate investing. At the recording of this episode, the Fed just hiked another 0.25%. Some people were split about if they were going to go up 0.5%, but I think some of the bank crisis cooled them off a little
Probably
bit.
freaked some people out. Yeah, and everybody's like, hey, your money's safe. No one panic. No one run the rest of the banks. So
it's interesting. I mean, it kind of since we've been investing, we've not seen what people call contagion, right? So the fear that's associated with having, making a run on the banks pulling back from lending. It rattled me a little bit, I think, just to see people's mentality. We had people in our area, Northwest Ohio, that did not get paid because their payroll was delayed due to stuff that happened with the Silicon Valley Bank.
Joke's on everyone else. If you don't have any money in the bank, you don't got to worry about your money being gone.
Joke's on you. My money is in crypto. Oh, man.
So today we have Ryan Hill joining us. Ryan, how you doing?
Good. Excited to be on your podcast today, guys.
So Ryan is with Suncrest Capital. They're a real estate investing company that focuses primarily on mobile home park acquisition and operations. And you guys are around 1,250 pads right now. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so about 1,250 pads, 21 mobile home parks, one RV park, and one strip mall, essentially. And we have one RV park and one mobile home park just about to go under contract in Tennessee. So excited about
Awesome.
that.
Yeah, and what markets are you guys in?
So mostly the Midwest, so Missouri, Kansas, and Iowa are the bulk of our properties. We have a couple out here in Idaho where like Brett and I live. Brett, my partner, co-founded Suncrest back in 2021. So we manage from afar.
Wow, awesome.
So Ryan, give us a flyover on your life prior to real estate and how'd you get in?
Sure. Yeah. So most of my career had been in education. So I was a high school science teacher for 13 years, coached a bunch of sports, basketball, cross country, track and field, then got married and didn't have as much time for the coaching, and then kids cost a lot of money. And on a teacher salary, childcare and all that wasn't making enough. So I became a residential real estate agent in right when the market crashed in 2008, which was an interesting experience. So it took a couple of years to kind of start making profit there, but I was a residential agent for 13 years while I was still teaching and doing some coaching.
So describe that. You got your license right when the market turned. Did you realize what was going on at the time?
It was, I'd say the license was right before it started, but so a bit. And I wouldn't have been able to go full time into it at that point. I had my W-2 job, so we still had food on the table and all that good stuff, but extras. And like I said, like just childcare was so expensive with toddlers and stuff. So yeah. So just grinded it out. And
it was probably pretty hard to convince people to buy some houses right when all that happened.
Yeah, especially as a new agent, right? Like, it's as you guys know, that's challenging when you first get in the business to convince people that you have enough expertise to fulfill that role.
Dude, I remember the first open house that I ever did. I picked up my first buyer lead. Okay, so I'm at the open house. This guy was moving in to take a doctoral position at one of the hospitals, and he's like, we're walking through the house and comment on stuff, and I just got my license, and he's like, man, you probably see this stuff all the time, don't you? And I was like, yes, this is a common thing for people to see
in a house.
And
Yeah.
Man, that was an interesting one. But no, it's funny. Real estate agents crack me up. I am one, so I can kind of make these jokes. But like everything going on in the market right now, all the brokers, all the agents are like, oh no, rates are coming down. Rates will be back down. Lenders, rates will be back down. You know, it's like as though it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's like, yeah, you really kind of need to say that to keep people interested in the home buying process. You know, people still have to move. But all the investors I talked to were like, man, rates aren't coming back down.
Yeah, they're
not
like,
for another 24 months, you know.
18 months to 2 years.
So it's funny in that perspective there. But so Ryan, just a little context for our listeners. You know, you and I got partnered together in a mastermind group with some others going to Best Ever Conference here this last year, and quickly, you know, realized the commonality with the mobile home focus. And you guys were really generous to us because at the time, you know, we were working through a mobile home park acquisition of our own. And then we got to meet together, you know, at the conference and talk a little bit further over dinner and stuff. One of the things I want to focus on today for our listeners, I don't know if you've gotten this reaction when you tell people you invest in mobile home parks, but man, it's a split camp out there. Some people are like, mobile home parks, I'd never invest in mobile home parks. And then some people are like, man, you haven't heard about mobile home parks? And it's like, there's this secret thing going on. There's been a lot of buzz around it. So pull the curtain back for us. Why all of a sudden have mobile home parks been in the mainstream? And what are those perceptions that people have about mobile home parks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, they've become more and more popular. We bought our first one in 2019, my wife and I, just a little small one. And I think it was really starting to ramp up then, the interest. I think a big part of it actually was Brandon Turner on Bigger Pockets. And then I forget when he bought his first one, but he started talking about it maybe in 2020. And so I think the secret was out at that point for a lot of people that follow that podcast anyway. But yeah, the reactions I get similar. It's like the stigma of mobile home parks and like Trailer Park Boys and depicted in movies and things isn't the best of light. And so people are like, why would do you feel safe going into them? Like, and then people that understand the model and how they're, so especially right now, like recession resistant, they were COVID resistant, just the, occupancy stays high, the payments stay high, and the ability to add value by bringing in homes to vacant lots, just it's a no-brainer from just the economics of it.
I think one thing that's interesting too, I'd love to hear your comment on this, is, there's always the innovators exist in any industry, people who are trying to get out ahead of the curve. And if you've ever seen that life cycle of how ideas are adopted, got the innovators, the early majority, like going through. And so I think it seemed that somebody at some point identified that this was a very kind of ripe industry, and talk about some of the factors that made mobile home parks so ripe for the picking.
Yeah. I think mom and pops own the mass majority of them. It's not a consolidated industry yet. I think I've heard some experts say within 5 years or so, it likely will be, especially for the larger parks. But I think there's always going to be the ability for people to get into the space on some of the smaller community, like from three to maybe 50 lots, right? Those, like we're not even going after those sizes anymore unless they're like right next door to one of our existing ones. So, and then the REITs are going after ones that are several hundred lots and very large. So I think there's always going to be that space for people to get in on the mom and pop side of things, from people that have owned them since they built them in the 70s or 80s and are retiring out of them, right?
And explain why that would even be an opportunity for somebody to buy from a mom and pop owner.
Yeah, it's the opportunity, especially for like owner financing. It has a lot of advantages for for sellers, and it seems to be way more common in the mobile home space than I've seen in any other industry. Or
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a cold calling team. So they're calling every week. We have park lists and things like that. And so we try to find the motivation of why somebody might be interested in selling. And some they want nothing to do with it. They just want cashed out. I'll pay my taxes, or maybe they'll 1031 them or try to defer them in some way. But for some mom and pops, they enjoy that monthly income coming in, and so that can be a talking point. Like, so instead of talking purchase price, how much do you need coming in for to be comfortable in your retirement or whatever? And if that number is workable in how you're underwriting it and to come up with a purchase price, it can be to your advantage that way. And it's a win-win. They're not paying the taxes on it, on those owner finance payments, and you're getting a good deal and can get into it quick, maybe with not a lot of money.
Yeah. To be fair to your point, I didn't hear about mobile home park investing until Brandon Turner started talking about it on the Bigger Pockets podcast.
Oh, wow.
Like, it wasn't on my radar.
What a simpleton.
I know. Never thought I'd be doing it. Never thought, you know what I mean? It was just kind of like, oh, wow, Brandon's smart.
I didn't hear about it until I heard it from you. I was kidding.
No, and then obviously we've come in contact with quite a few investors now that are within that realm. And one of the other investors we were talking to was saying the same thing you were. There's so much wheeling and dealing to be had with these mom and pops, it seems like, and he was telling us that most of their deals are creative finance in some way with mobile home parks.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting about this space is you talk to somebody who's a mom and pop owner, and maybe they've heard or kind of sniffed out what people are then turning around and selling these mobile home parks for. And they're like beside themselves. They're like, there's no way that mobile home park is worth that, or that you're getting that, per lot. But the reason why is that there's a bigger fish that's looking at this asset class to park, private equity, there's some REITs, to your point. The numbers look different for some of the bigger players out there. And that you just, if you're the mom and pop owner that owned it because you just need cash flow, you can't conceive of the appreciation. But you guys have kind of dialed it in to understand the levers to pull, that when I put a mobile home on this vacant lot, here's what it does to the value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So depending on your lot rent, so say $300 to $400 lot rent, every home you put on there, as you extrapolate that out with whatever your expense ratio is, it can be 40 to 60,000 in added value to the property itself. So most of the communities we've purchased have about a 30 to 40% vacancy. And so we like the analogy of you essentially you're buying a horizontal apartment building that you can add additional floors to for not much money, right? Mm-hmm. So you can add these extra units, and every unit you add might, if you buy a used home, bring it in, set it up, you might be in it for 25, 30,000, just depending on the quality. But you're adding 40 to 60,000 in value to the property. So
this is a good segue then into the next question. It seems to me that there's two philosophies of how to own a mobile home park, right? So option A, we had Jim Carpenter. You can go back and listen to that episode. Their group, they are predominantly buying and then owning simultaneously the land and the infrastructure and the mobile homes themselves, and renting them out like you would a single family house, right? So they're in ownership of both. Option B is I own the land and infrastructure, but I try and divest myself of the actual mobiles and choose not to own those. So can you talk about those two strategies, pros and cons on them, and then what you guys are doing?
Yeah. So that first option with the park-owned homes that you're renting out, the potential upside is much higher than option B, is with the rent
From a cash flow perspective.
Yeah, for the cash flow perspective. So I spoke to early on as I was exploring mobile home parks, a company out of California where they're bullish and they're 100% park owned homes. We want to own the homes, we want the lot rent, the home rent.
Wow.
And so they, in their underwriting, essentially they're saying, well, we can get $6,000 more a year by renting the home out. And we do a good job with making sure the homes are in good shape, of walking them and maintaining them, making sure managers are going through those homes quarterly. And if there's, changing filters or checking appliances, checking leaks, etc. So their underwriting, they put like $1,000 a year for maintenance and fixes. So your net's $5,000 more on that home. It's a lot more work. And then potentially if you have a furnace or an AC, something goes out, like that money is kind of washed, or maybe you're underwater. So our model, we don't want to be in the business of fixing toilets, and we don't have the person power necessarily for that either. So we do want to de-risk ourselves from that side. So any of the park owned homes that we inherit when we purchase a community or portfolio, most of them are already leased to own, where the tenant's responsible for fixes. But that doesn't mean it's not going to come back to you, right? Like if they take off in the middle of the night, you're going to be responsible for turning it over anyway. But for the most part, they do. They take care of them. They end up owning the home. We want them owning their homes. We're not taking care of the leaking toilets or broken furnaces.
So, and that's a good distinguishment. Pros to the one is you get potentially more income on that. It's also harder to scale that model. And you guys mentioned that you're doing this remotely. You're managing these parks remotely. So, what are the most crucial systems or the hires even that you guys rely on daily to operate your portfolio remotely?
So the system we rely on is through Gino Wickman's book Traction. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Yeah, we're working through it right now.
Yeah, so that model, we've any of our planning or project management meetings were based on that model and that meeting style. So we started that a little over a year ago. So that's allowed us to stay lean with the number of people, and stay productive and on top of projects that we need to be staying on top of.
Because you brought that up, talk about that a little bit from the standpoint of how much work has it taken to be disciplined to actually walk out that operating system? And then what have been some of the big wins that you've seen come from that now on the other side of it?
Yeah, so we had our core leadership team do the book study. Like we read it, we discussed it, and then we just started implementing the system. So we use Trello. I know some people use Monday.com or whatever, Asana. So we've been using Trello since the beginning, and that's scaled well with us. So using that as the organizational system. But I think what's come out of it is the accountability factor of it. Like you're efficient in identifying problems, discussing solutions. You're not getting stuck in talking about one thing for a half an hour. It's a pretty regimented way to go through problems, issues, projects, etc. But it is the accountability piece that we have these, the weekly meetings, and you're asked to update, like, are you on track with what you said you're going to be on track with? And then, yes or no. And if you're not, then we put that to the issue.
Fired.
Board.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, I'd be fired. But yeah, so put it to the issues board, and then you talk about the issue and you come up with the solution and get it back on course. So it's these constant course corrections as you're going along, and the accountability piece has made a huge difference for us.
Yeah, always going back and reevaluating and checking out what you're doing to make sure it's towards your, quarterly goals, yearly, 3-year and 5-year goals. That way you're planning ahead.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
This is what's been convicting, I think, even for Seth and I, and why we felt the push to work through that book. It's amazing to me how long I will look at something I know is a problem or a drag or dead weight or inefficient and leave it there. You know what I mean? And then begin to work around it. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like your body, when there's something, you have like a mass or something, it forms scar tissue around it. Like, well, if it's going to stay, we might as well just contain it. And that becomes our strategy, is more like, damage containment, mitigation. When it's like, deal with it. Like, and that's what traction does. It gives you kind of a framework to then actually identify, cut out that, prune back and streamline. So that's interesting that you guys have used that. What are some other, do you have employees or even team members, that aren't a part of your partnership that you lean on pretty heavily for the mobile homes?
Yeah, we have a executive assistant, Allie. We hired her straight out of Boise State University. She had a business background, but she wears a ton of hats. It's investor relations, investor presentations, a myriad of, like for us, we're mobile home dealers in all the states we operate. There's just a ton of paperwork and making sure permits and whatever. So she's full time, and then we have a financial analyst who he lives in Texas. His name's Tripp, and he has made us much more efficient just on projecting. Much better at projecting projects that are coming up in our current budget, and we don't quite have enough to do that, so we need to cut back somewhere else. So like our projection side of things is much, much better than before, where we were reacting to maybe a budget crisis, like something like a water main break and
right.
Like, that kind of stuff.
Your budget forms around what's happening, what's going wrong. That's where you put the money. That's not a great long-term strategy. So how do you pay him as a consultant? Does he have upside or participate in the deals, or?
So he's W-2. So both are W-2, and then
with Suncrest.
Yeah. And then we have 2 regional managers that are W-2. We inherited them with a portfolio, and they're awesome. They do a great job, but they were W-2 then. Most of our regional managers or park managers, though, we want 1099. But I'd say the bulk of our workforce is our VA team. So we have virtual assistants that we've worked and developed, and they've grown with us.
And that's probably for your cold calling stuff too. You use VAs for that, or?
We tried that, but we found that the accents were tough for some of our mom and pop sellers to connect with. So we have a team. They do it part-time, but they're based in the US. So one gentleman who's found 2 off-market deals for us that we've closed on, he's retired, and he wanted something to do. And he does a great job connecting with those owners that are similar age bracket.
Wow.
Then we have a couple of others that are calling that connect with different types of people. So we've been able to close two of those with those part-time folks, and those, that's just a 1099. So really we have about 6 full-time people, including myself. I just went full-time last June from being an elementary school principal for the last 7 years. And then
I bet you're loving life right now.
Well, it's a different stress, but yeah, I do. I love it. I love improving these properties that people live in and rely on. And, we really do believe in protecting and improving affordable housing. And there's such a need for it, but that's one of our driving forces for the work that we do.
Yeah. So out of what you guys own, the 1,250 pads, how much out of that, what's maybe the closest figure you can think of that is park-owned homes out of that?
I think we're probably around 10%. And out of those, maybe 1% is a straight rental still. The rest of them are on lease to own.
Oh, okay. Wow. So most of the ones of parks you've bought, you've already got them on lease to own plans to divest yourself of those. Okay.
Yep. And then on the home sale side, because we want to try to sell them first, we partner with PEP, our Performance Equity Partners. And the one we just today actually are now on their platform is Zippy MH. So zippymh.com, which they've described themselves to us. They're new to us still, but like the rocket like Rocket Mortgage of mobile homes.
Wow.
So they can lend to mobile homes that are in parks.
Yeah, they're specific for mobile home purchases in parks, and they're growing. Like they're just adding Iowa this next month, which we're excited about because half our communities are up there.
Mm-hmm.
Their interest rates seem to be lower. The down payments may be a little higher than like PEP's 3%, and depending on credit score, Zippy is like 5 to 10%. Then we're also with 21st, with Triad, so we have different options that we can give to potential tenants to try to qualify to purchase these homes.
That's awesome. Yeah, they're not in Ohio, are they? Asking for a friend.
They may be, and if they're not, they'll be there soon. Yeah.
We'll have to look into that. Hey, so we're kind of focusing in on, okay, boom or bust. Is this a fad? Is it here to stay? Do you think mobile home parks will be in decline in demand? Or, what's going to happen in the foreseeable future? Give us your crystal ball.
Yeah. So I don't see values necessarily dropping too much. With interest rates rising, obviously it does a bit, but cap rates are still staying fairly low. I don't think we're going to see the 10 caps again. Like those were kind of even before I got in 2019. We've found some, like off market, you can still find those from the mom and pops, like we have. But anything on market, it's not going to, unless it's a total dumpster fire that you don't want to touch, unless you're seasoned. But as far as demand, I think that keeps on going up and supply keeps going down. So it's something like a net 90 communities a year are lost to redevelopment. Typically, like the value is going to be higher for a commercial building or a different multifamily, because mom and pops have kept their lot rents artificially low, and so the value is not there for it to be a mobile home park. And then cities don't love them either for the most part, so that's a challenge.
Yeah. Let me give you a real case study of, you had mentioned, supply is diminishing. Florida, this last hurricane that came through there, we have a number of investors that are invested in Florida, and a lot of those that were along the Gulf Coast were uninsured. So like literally when it came through, no insurance on the property, and those places will not rebuild. So now that becomes vacant land that will never be used again as, mobile home parks, and it'll be, up for grabs for development or whatever, the highest and best uses for that. But if you're a mobile home park operator in Florida, inland a little bit, you're loving life because, the demand just went up. So I think that is an interesting comment. What are some of the major pitfalls when buying a mobile home park?
Yeah, I think like we've talked about it with the first one you've been looking at, but infrastructure, and we've gotten a lot better at evaluating infrastructure, but we've had a couple of properties that we didn't look deep enough or made assumptions, and it's come back to haunt us from a replacement standpoint, where it's now $200,000 more than we expected to spend for a project. So I think that's a big piece. And then also I think overestimated our ability to turn around a park that had a number of tenants that like sex offenders, non-paying residents. Like it'll just take a few months to turn it over and get rid of them and get new, and that can be a nightmare, right? It's just, and then the homes that they leave behind are not in great shape a lot of time, and so just those types of things going into it. I think our assumptions for how long it would take, we thought we could do it faster, and it took longer.
That's good. And that goes into really knowing your local laws, because from the little that I've, dove into it, eviction laws and stuff are very different for mobile homes than they are for, a brick and mortar residential, single family house.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on to our smaller pockets segment.
Love it.
So, Ryan, go ahead and tell us, what has been your worst real estate deal? And maybe maybe it's before, maybe you got into mobile home parks, but what's your worst real estate deal? And then what did you learn from it?
Yeah, it's one that we got as part of a portfolio that it's about a 38 space park. And it's one of those that I was kind of describing with the infrastructure for. So it had a well, it had septic tanks, nine known septic tanks, but as we connect, it's now connected to city sewer. But through that process, we found that there were like 3 other septic tanks that no one knew about and needed to be, demolished, that kind of stuff.
One septic tank's bad enough.
Yeah. Well, and the reason we changed it to city sewer was right outside the park, but the septic tanks were failing, and like a heavy rain, they were overflowing, like literally stuff down the street. Right.
Oh, wow. What was that? So you had to actually, when you transferred it over to city sewer, did you have to go in there and dig out the septics and fill them in, or what?
Yep, that's
all
part
9
of the
them.
Process of, so the company we hired to do the whole thing, that's part of their process, because you have to do it in that case. We didn't realize, we should have, the topography and the rock type. There's a lot of limestone in Springfield area, and how deep these septic lines needed to go for connecting to the city. I think we ended up spending 20 to 30,000 more just to break rock.
Whoa. Wow.
So when we were doing, you can do your engineering report, and so we did, but we didn't add the topography or the soil type to it, which we're doing a similar project nearby now, and we are doing that, so we can anticipate it. But you don't necessarily have 20 to 30,000 extra laying around to do those things. Wow. The water there was on a well, again, city water right outside the park. So we naively thought, well, let's just connect it to the existing system. But no, you have to go through engineering diagrams, work with the city. They want you to upgrade it to city code standards. So manholes, fire hydrants, like adding all these additional stuff.
Wow.
Whoa.
So what we thought would be, maybe 20, 30,000, turns out to be quite a bit more, because now you have to do all this extra stuff. So
33,000.
Is that a number that you had? No, it was, I don't remember. It's quite a bit more to do the whole water system. I think we were up about 70,000 to replace the water system, moving water pits that cars are driving over because they were too close to the road. So anyway, I think we'd rock our budget if going into it with what we know now. So future ones, we know better, but some of those you don't know until you get into the weeds on it.
So for that park specifically, I mean, have you guys gotten through all that now? Is it tied into city water, tied into city sewer, all kind of buttoned up now at this point, or are you still in process?
80% there. So it is connected to city sewer, city water, and we're upgrading the entire electric infrastructure. So
did
full deal.
So wow. So during that thing, did you have, I mean, since you bought it within a portfolio, was there just kind of enough cash flow in the whole portfolio to help float some of those extra expenses, or did you have to raise more money for that park?
Yeah, we've lent some of our own money to it, because we try not to raise, do capital calls we want to protect our investor money. So we'll lend our own money to those types of things. But the short answer is yes. It's sort of protected because it's within a portfolio, and we bought it for I think 12,500 a pad in a market where they're selling for 40 to 45,000 a pad.
Wow.
So on the back end there's gonna be enough margin there to be okay.
It's so funny. I just imagine, Ryan, you're walking through that park. You're like, you guys like the water here? You like that water? It's new water. Lighting's good, isn't it? Just to get a little validation for the money you had to spend in the infrastructure. So
that's one community they haven't complained about rent raises. So
yeah,
yeah, they better not.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, man. We're gonna go into what we call our little nugget. So this is a practical takeaway piece of advice for our listeners that they can implement to their real estate investing businesses. Could be something tried and true, something simple.
Boy, I think it's just the power of relationships in this business, and especially this industry with mobile home parks. As you guys have probably found, people are willing to give of their time, knowledge, and expertise, but you have to reach out and develop those relationships first. So listening to different podcasts like yours, more industry specific ones. There's a number of them now on mobile home parks that weren't there when I first started. So like one of my favorites, I'll plug him, Ryan Naris, with Mobile Home Parks in Real Life. He had just started his podcast like 2-3 years ago, 3+ years ago now. I just sent him an email and he became an early mentor for me,
Wow.
So it's, if I hadn't done that, I don't know if I would have even ever bought my first park.
Wow. Just off listening to his podcast, shot him an email, boom, here you are, over 1,200 pads.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I started with 19 pad park, just my wife and I, and that was a owner finance deal. So yeah, it was, so just the relationship part is huge. Like even for, you guys, we've met in person and been on some Zoom mastermind calls, but down the road, who knows, we could do deals together or find properties for each other. And so it's just that net add every time you start developing those relationships.
And I think that is a huge point for anybody who's listening to this podcast, other podcasts, is if it's anything I've learned about real estate, you have to have the long view in mind. If you want to be in the business a long time, if you want to develop and cultivate those relationships, you got to think long term. And there's a lot of things that Seth and I do on a daily basis, and Ryan, I'm sure this is true for yourself, that putting your time, energy, and attention into that thing, that conversation, that email, that social media post, that relationship is not going to profit you tomorrow. But you're just throwing seed out there, and some of it's going to take, and you never know how that's going to shape you in the future. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So
yeah, running.
I can give you one recent example of that. We a partner that's invested a couple times with us, done some projects with us, hadn't really talked to him much for a number of months. He brought us an idea for an RV development in Tennessee. So I was like, I don't know any RV developers in Tennessee. So I just posted it on a RV park Facebook group. Like, anybody know develop? Had a number of people reach out, but one guy who reached out were almost going under contract on his little park that he started building a year and a half ago.
Whoa.
And so that, an off-market deal, but just those dominoes start falling and deals start happening.
Yeah, and there is this invisible threshold that you cross after you've been doing that long enough, the adding value, the reaching out, the networking. This threshold, when you cross that, you start to see things pop up that you didn't for the longest time. And you're like, is this even worth it? Am I doing the right thing? You just got to hang in there long enough. What's been one of the greatest resources in your career?
It's a good question. I think I don't know if it's necessarily a resource, but when you mess up and you fail and you figure out what happened and how to improve from it. So just that type of mindset, that growth mindset, that problems are opportunities in the making. So I think books like growth mindset. There's Grit by Duckworth. Angela I can't remember. Duckworth is her last name, but Grit. So that's actually one of our core principles is grit. So just those types of books, podcasts, whatever it is, just to get your mindset in a place where it's not going to go right most of the time,
right?
Especially early on. So just overcoming those challenges.
And to your point, you made the mistake on that small park, with the water issues and the septic issues, but now you're like, I know better for parks moving forward to really dive into some of that stuff and maybe, contact the city in advance. Hey, what would happen? What would that look like if we wanted to tie into city eventually and get some of those numbers up front? Yeah, it's invaluable.
Well, even going at the conference we were just at, Joe Fairless was up there talking about one of his first deals that he did. And you look at these guys and you see on LinkedIn $2.7 billion in assets under management. And that's all you see is the snapshot. Well, then getting to hear him really break down the huge gaffe that his first deal was reminds you that the $2.7 billion of assets under management was built on the foundation of the failure that he experienced here in Cincinnati, on that first deal. Mm-hmm. And just it puts everything in perspective. But hey, last thing, talk about your company, Suncrest. How can people follow your guys' continued success and learn more about you?
Yeah, easiest way is suncrestcap.com. That's where you'll find our investor portal. You'll find information about us. You'll find information about our portfolio. So we offer investors syndications. We have an open-ended fund that specializes in RV parks and mobile home parks, kind of our bread and butter. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, just about all the places you'd expect us to be. So search Suncrest Cap or Suncrest Capital. You'll find us, I'm sure.
We will put all of those links in the show notes so you can reference that. But Ryan, thank you, man. We've had some mobile home guys on before, but nobody that's really kind of broken it down systematically like this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it, guys.
As always, excited that you joined us on another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If this episode added to your tool belt or left you feeling inspired, go ahead and share it with a friend. Stay tuned every Tuesday for new episodes. And if you want to get in touch with us, go to our LinkedIn or Facebook profiles and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper. See you next time.